Dom and Sue, welcome to the show. Tell me, firstly, Dom, about this contribution, because you've chosen it for Sue, is that right?
Yes, well, what happened is that Sue and I made our selection. She happened to choose a male author, and I've chosen a female author. So, effectively, when it comes to the reading out, we thought we would swap. So, a little bit of Gerald Durrell coming from me later. But this is the wonderful author, Joan Wyndham. And when I was living in Chelsea, on a houseboat, I used to go to a wonderful second-hand bookshop, and I would go in there, got chatting to the people in there. And one of the regular customers, incidentally, was Dudley Sutton, who used to play Tinker in Lovejoy, but story for another occasion, and rather sort of set the tone of the place. And I was looking through the biography section, and my eye fell upon the title of this book, which is Love is Blue, and hence inclusion in today's programme. And when I read it, it's a really vibrant and exciting diary written by a young woman who comes to her own kind of self-realisation, or certainly becoming aware of herself sexually, but with the backdrop of the Second World War and the Blitz and everything that was taking place. And she, of course, like everybody, has to make her contribution to the war effort, and she ends up in Scotland. This is where we pick up her story, and Sue has a couple of entries for us.
Saturday the 3rd. It seems I needn't have worried about being bored. Excitement has arrived in the shape of an invitation to a dance given by the Royal Engineers. What is more, it's being held in their mess at Beaufort Castle, home of Lord Lovat, commander, leader and hero of the Dieppe beaches. There is not a girl in our mess who doesn't secretly lust after him, including me, and the very thought of visiting his home and maybe catching a glimpse of him thrills me to the marrow. Sunday the 4th. It was a wizard party. I was jitterbugging madly with a French-Canadian who danced like an angel when the side door flew open and in came a tall boy in tweeds, about 6'2", and bursting out of his much too small jacket. I thought he looked a bit of a bounder. Whenever you see a man in civvies at one of these do's, you immediately think he's the clerk of the works or the GPO, and you avoid him like the plague. However, he began to monopolise me like mad, and my first shock came when he mentioned that he was a major and just come back from fighting in Africa. He was only 25 and quite handsome, with a big hawk-like nose. The real bombshell was to come. We were sitting out a dance, and I was burbling happily on about this mouldering old dump and what a decadent lot the aristocracy were, the exception, of course, being that wild madcap Lord Lovat, who I would dearly love to meet. There's a rumour he might be coming to the dance, I twittered on, in which case I would be more than ready to lie down on the floor and let him walk over me in his rubber-soled plimsolls. "Oh," said the boy, "do you mean that stinker Shimmy?" "Why, yes, do you know him?" "Tolerably well. He's my cousin, and this mouldering old pile is where I'm spending my leave." Imagine my shame and horror. However, Hamish, for that was the boy's name, thought it all a huge joke, and we got drunk together, and I was on top form and happy as hell. We found we'd practically every taste in common, from Hemingway, flamenco and bullfights to John Donne and Carnet de Bal, and what's more, we are both Catholics. I asked him where he'd be posted to next, but he clammed up. "You're on special duties yourself," he said. "You ought to know better than to ask silly questions like that." So I suppose he's about to do something top secret. How exciting. As for Shimmy, his comings and goings are shrouded in even deeper mystery. I suppose if we ever got round to invading France, he and his commandos will be among the first on the beaches. We asked the band to play our favourite tunes and staggered round, followed by furiously jealous glances from all my friends. The REs are a stuffy lot, and I had the best-looking man in the room. Of course, none of them knew who he was. He just sneaked in from a house party at the lodge to see if there was any fun to be had. About 2 a.m, the lights were turned out and we sang the RE's special song. You go round in a circle, doing weird gestures, and the colonel sits in the middle with a lighted lantern. I don't know what it all meant, but it sounded fine. By this time, the Hon. Hamish was getting amorous and suggested we meet on his next leave and stay at the Berkeley, so I thought it was time to go.
Interesting, because that was done long before the D-Day landings, and Lord Lovat, or Shimi Lovat, Shimi being Gallic for Simon, They performed amazingly heroic deeds, and only the other day a statue was unveiled on the beaches of Alamosh, where the British landed, for the Highlander, the piper, who piped the Highland troops of the Lovat Scouts and Lord Lovat's troops up the beach. But Hamish is in fact not his name, the person. I can reveal this because when I read this book, first of all, I decided that the author was in all likelihood still alive, because there's such a vibrancy about her work. And I went through on the internet to her agent, and the next day I was sitting at my desk on my houseboat, and the telephone went, and there was this wonderfully sort of brusque voice at the other end that said, "Hello, my name's Joan Wyndham, and I understand you want to talk to me, young man." It turned out she lived about 500 yards from where I lived, and we met and had a wonderful lunch in the Chelsea Arts Club, which she allowed me to record the conversation. And I asked her specifically about this episode, actually. I asked her about a huge array of what had happened in her book, but I then determined, and I put to her, that this wasn't in fact Hamish. This was Hugh Fraser, who went on to mount a credible leadership bid against Margaret Thatcher. Many decades after that was written. They went on to have a tremendous steamy affair, but he revealed that he couldn't possibly marry Joan because he was looking for a goddess. And Joan Wyndham, sitting with me in the Chelsea Arts Club, was amused to note that he did eventually marry Lord Longford's daughter, Antonia, who is a great author and carries her first husband. She was, of course, married to Harold Pinter for many years, but she carries her first husband's name, and that is why she is called Antonia Fraser.
And you said you recorded this interview?
Yes, yeah, and she's now passed on, Joan, but a fantastic book, and if anybody would love to read about the Second World War, but in this wonderful sort of personalised contact, and the way she writes, for instance, about sexual activity is a long way from pornography. She really does it very, very well and very sincerely. And the other person she got to know in the Chelsea, because it all became a big art scene, was Dylan Thomas. But therein lies a story I couldn't possibly reveal on community radio.
Oh, Dom, you always do this to us.
Read the book.
You tease us. Tom, thank you very much for that contribution, and Sue for reading it so superbly. And this track, we must come to some music, was chosen by you, Sue.